Good morning, everyone. Just going to wait a few more minutes to see, make sure everyone can log in and see us. And if you are on, while we're there, I can see people are joining. There is, if you move your mouse around at the very bottom of the screen, there's a chat button. If you want to click on that, that way we can chat back and forth with each other during our webinar. That way we can ask questions for our panelists today. Hi, Nate, I see you. Testing the chat. So we will get started in a few minutes. But just wanted to say hello, everyone. My name is Christy Pierce-Percy, and I am CREWSV Silicon Valley's president this year. And we are missing our programs, definitely. But we thought of a really fun way to navigate that in the meantime and stay connected to each one of you. And that way we came up with having a coffee conversation. So every Tuesday, we're going to be having an expert of the week, kind of talking about topics that are really critical to this time. And that way, because things are changing daily, it is really important that with all the information we receive, it's just nice to have this group where we can ask questions candidly, just get that information. And today, we're lucky enough to have BBSI. And so thank you so much. While we're still joining here, I just wanted to also thank you so much to our sponsors. We have one of our platinum sponsors today, BBSI. Our other platinum sponsors, One Workplace, we have Impact Group and Washington Holdings. And then our gold sponsors, we have American Asphalt, Arborwell, Columbia Property Trust, Hayworth, HGA, Iron Construction, Paul and McKay, and Perfection Services. So thank you guys, thank you so much. I would love to have our panelists just do a brief intro and say hi to you all and let you know, who they are and what they do. Again, we want this to be interactive, the chats. We want this to be, really answering any questions you may have along the way. It's really, really important. So please use that chat option as we speak today. So today on the panel, we have Tim Leets, we have Gary Puckett, and Nancy Arrouzet. Is that how you pronounce it, Nancy?
Close enough.
Close enough. And we also have Jennifer Anderson. Jennifer Anderson is our past president from 2019, CREWSV Silicon Valley. So thank you all. I will let you take it away.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Tim Leets, area manager for the San Jose Silicon Valley office of BBSI. We're a national consulting firm. We're pretty much like a PEO, only we're very localized and personal services in the areas of general business consulting, HR consulting, payroll specialists, and also risk management. And so in that case, in these times, we have got a lot of activity with our clients because we primarily serve small and medium-sized businesses. And so within that world, in this Corona time, there are a lot of questions, a lot of things happening. And one of the things we found is that, and I'm sure you're experiencing, the laws are changing literally every day. Every day something's being changed or clarified or modified. And so it's important to stay up to date, but also to stay, to stay flexible because as we navigate these times, there's some good principles to follow. And then there's also just making sure you have access to information on a current basis. So my role as area manager is to organize teams of consultants. So fortunately for me, like most business owners, I can rely on people like Nancy, who's very, very experienced in HR and knows more than I'll ever know. And then Gary, with his role as a business partner, deals more directly with owners on strategy and things of that nature. He's also done tremendous work with CARES Act and the PPP program. So they'll answer most of the questions, but I just wanted to kick it off in general and let it go to Nancy and Gary. But Nancy, do you want to share a little bit about yourself and then Gary as well?
Sure. So my name is Nancy Arrouzet, and I've been with BBSI a little over 5 years now as an HR consultant. I have years and years, more than I can quantify, of HR experience in multiple different industries here in California, including, manufacturing, food processing, high tech, retail. The common denominator always is people. And so that's the joy of the role always, is helping people, and especially through this crisis as we're dealing with right now. And yeah, Gary, if you'd like to give your background and tell us all about you.
I'm a business consultant here at BBSI. Prior to that, I'm a 3-time business owner. And before that, I came from the high tech sector. So the bulk of my time is spent with owners, working through strategy, working through different programs that are going to benefit them, create value for their company. And I'm crazy enough to actually have dug into the CARES Act. And I think at this point, I'm as close to as knowledgeable as you can be on it, knowing that yesterday it changed and the day before it changed. So I try to keep up to speed, and I'll answer any questions you have.
Great.
Thank you. Jen?
So I'm sorry, go ahead, Jen. Sorry.
Really quickly explain why I'm on the call. My name is Jennifer Anderson. I'm your CREW past president. And I'm also with Bizzuto Insurance Services. So I work very closely with BBSI and bring them in on customers and they really fill a need, from the HR compliance to safety, payroll. I hate to use a bad word with this group here, but if just to give people a context, you've heard of maybe ADP Total Source. This is that on steroids though, because these people that you see on this call are boots on the ground, and they're in your offices helping you through times like this. Maybe not in person right now, I guess, but on Zoom calls, and they're one of those people that they're your lifelines and you call them constantly. So I just appreciate being here today and helping people understand what you guys do. And we thank you as a sponsor, but we also, I personally appreciate being able to call you guys constantly over the last 5 weeks to find out, how do my customers deal with these things, because it's unprecedented. So I'm looking forward to helping customers through this and CREW through this.
Appreciate that. And I think one of the things that's most important in this, with all the changes that go on, is that you do find trusted sources for information, because there's a lot of conflicting information out there as well. And so as you find, whether it's key consultants or key sources, we're going to provide resource materials afterwards as well to continue your journey. But it's really important to narrow it down to trusted sources, because it's hard to digest all the information. So if you have other people that can synthesize it for you and help it relate to your particular situation, that's very helpful.
Thank you. And thank you all again for being here. It's just so important for us. And I'm excited to hear the answers to some of these questions, because so really quick, before we even started our event today, we put a call out to questions for our members. And thank you so much for those who submitted the questions prior, because I'm going to ask some of them right now. And hopefully they pertain to some of you. If not, you'll definitely be a little bit more educated, like myself, after this. So if it's okay, I'd like to ask a few questions to start out. And if you think of any along the way, please feel free to use the chat option that's on the Zoom. Again, if you kind of move your mouse around and click on the bottom where it says chat, a little chat box will pop up to your right, and we can all chat back and forth to each other and ask those questions. There is an anonymous option. If you want to remain anonymous, you can go ahead and click that and ask the questions. And even if you have questions after this, please feel free to forward them over. We'd be happy to answer them. So, okay, first question we received is, I'm considered an essential worker, but school is out and I don't have any help with my child. My employer doesn't have any solutions for me other than telling me that I have to take PTO or time off without pay. How do we navigate this as working parents?
Great question. To start with, and oftentimes as I answer questions, I have questions that I have to ask in order to provide an accurate answer. But if your company employs fewer than 500 employees, it's entirely possible that you may be eligible for the Emergency Family and Medical Leave Act benefit, which is a leave of absence that allows an employee to take up to 12 weeks of job-protected paid leave to care for kids whose school or daycare is closed. 10 of those weeks are paid under emergency FMLA, and 2 weeks could be paid under the new FFCRA, which is the Families First Corona Response Act. And so there are benefits out there, and it sounds like, based on the question, and again, depends on the size of the employer, that this could be an option.
Oh, thank you so much. That's a great resource. And then I see on the chat, it's great. We're chatting back and forth. I love it. Question number 2 is, my employee claimed 4 hours of general office because of IT issues, but they never informed me of any issues they had. What measures can we put in place so this doesn't happen again?
So as I mentioned before, I have questions before I can really answer this. So if I'm interpreting the question correctly, it sounds like you have an employee that charged sort of overhead or office time for 4 hours because they had internet connection or network issues. Depends on, so multiple layers here. First, might be helpful to, sort of establish a policy or a practice that, deals with just this issue, because this could happen to any of us at any given time. That if you have IT issues or you have connectivity issues, to contact supervisor, manager right away. There are some different programs that can sort of help monitor that, some of which are a little, kind of big brother-ish. But if you're using any kind of instant messaging feature or, some of the other platforms that can kind of monitor some of that, I would, this is just me. I have a tendency to give employees the benefit of the doubt before I go to, disciplinary action. But I would, give the person the benefit of the doubt sort of the first time. And then if it's recurring and it seems legitimate, whatever you can do to help that person from an IT perspective. But after that, I think it could become a performance management issue, and then just managing it that way. In this time, and all of the guidance that we are getting from attorneys and experts and, everybody, is as much as possible be really generous, flexible, encouraging of employees as they're getting used to this new world. For some, and we're going to talk about this some more about working from home specifically, but I would tend to err on, assume the best, help them through it, and then, if it's repeated sort of violations, then manage it that way. Manage it as a performance management issue.
Okay, great.
Makes sense?
Nancy, I think also you had recommended to me when we started this, if you are setting up any sort of monitoring system to identify how many hours somebody's working, to make sure that they know that ahead of time.
Yes.
And have that be part of your policy, that they sign off that that's happening.
Yeah, and I was actually going to cover a little bit of that in a future question here, but a key piece of this, especially for hourly employees, is the rules don't change for tracking hours, even though they're home. And so making sure that everybody is complying with all the wage and hour laws, tracking time, making sure employees are taking breaks, meal periods, all of that stuff, that's all absolutely still in play. And, staying compliant with that will keep, the labor commissioner from showing up at your door. That's a good practice.
Great. Something that we've done in our office is we have Microsoft Teams, and we have a section that we've dedicated to just IT issues. So if someone has something right away, they just tag our IT department, and the question goes directly to them, and then it's handled right then and there. That way we're all aware of anything happening. So
Yeah, one thing I was just going to add on to Nancy's thing is just the broader climate, which is California is always an employee-friendly state, and in the conditions we're in now, even more vigilant. So you want to make sure you're covering your bases and being as generous as possible in these times.
Okay, question number 3. What's the procedure for hiring someone during shelter in place? Are there different requirements?
This is such a great question because we do in fact have clients and companies that are hiring, and some of them are hiring like crazy right now. So that's such an encouraging question to see. Depending on the company's policies and procedures, the industry, the size, all of that stuff, a lot of this can be sort of business as usual practice for hiring. Now, business as usual, depending on, you know, how much distance, if people are having to do this remotely, you know, things that are impacted are things like pre-employment drug testing. A lot of our clients do pre-employment drug testing, and they have just suspended that because there's just no way to do it right now, for, you know, depending on the company and the situation. Also, the big impact that I have seen so far that we've been actually super happy about this is Section 2 of the I-9 that requires certification of identification documents. Thankfully, the rules have been relaxed a little bit during this pandemic, and you're now able to certify documents over Zoom, Skype, FaceTime, where you know, you've never been able to do that before. So that's made things a little bit easier. There may also be some additional postings and acknowledgments that have to be signed as a result of this weird time that we're in. And again, depending on industry, company, location, all of that stuff. But in general, except for doing things a little bit differently and some of the additional compliance requirements, it's fairly similar. Yeah.
That's really great. We're actually hiring right now, so we're exciting. Okay, question number 4. A little different. I've been furloughed. What steps should I take?
That's a great one. And we're certainly seeing, you know, this question a lot from employees and employers. One of the questions that I guess get asked a lot is what's the difference between a furlough and a layoff, reduction in force, and all of that. And the simplest way to think of a furlough is it's an unpaid leave of absence. So you're effectively terminating the person by all sort of, you know, look and feel, because when you furlough someone, you're paying them out their PTO and their vacation, and you've given them sort of the promise that they will be invited back, you know, when conditions and change. So the first thing, making sure that the employee, and sorry, I'm going to speak from both parts on this one, both from the employer and the employee's perspective, is making sure that that employee gets something in writing. That can be a memo. Ideally, it's a change in relationship form or whatever the company is using that just says, hey, my employment status has changed. I am now a furloughed employee for the foreseeable future. And that helps the furloughed employee be able to submit that to EDD for unemployment. So, you know, the proof that's needed to show that either hours, well, in this case, you know, full furlough. The biggest complaint and source of frustration that we are hearing right now is the horribly slow speed that EDD is processing unemployment claims. And so I would say if you've been furloughed, that's the first thing I would do, is, you know, go ahead and get your claim filed. If you can't get through on the EDD site, try it at 3 o'clock in the morning. Heard that one can be useful. And the site tends to be up a little bit more at that point. But that's going to be key, is making sure if your employer is not doing anything else, you know, for any kind of future pay, you definitely want to get that in the queue. Working with your employer too, and Jennifer, you can probably jump in on this with some more specifics, but to determine how long and if medical and dental benefits are going to be carried. Some companies are paying premiums, some are not. So really getting clear on whether or not this, you know, this triggers a COBRA event, so that all of that is, yeah.
I think in the furlough situation, people are mostly using that so that they can still retain the benefits for employees. If you are laid off or furloughed after the first of any month, you will retain benefits. If you were on them already, you'll retain benefits through the end of the month. But if you were laid off, then come the next month, you won't have any potentially. So definitely need to have a very deep conversation about when coverage will cease on your benefits plans. And I think in a furlough situation, you're a little better off from a benefit standpoint.
If I might throw something in on the first question where the employee was talking about leave and their employer not providing it. One of the things is, again, a lot of owners, they don't know. I mean, there's so much going on so fast. And so it may be a gentle conversation to say that you've heard some other things, or could we find out, or something to open the door to a conversation about what is available.
That's actually great advice, because like you said, a lot of these, especially smaller businesses, they have so much going on, especially, dealing with working from home and things that are just that never dealt with before. But that's great advice, because I would really love for that conversation to open if that was someone from our company. Okay, question number 5. What are the best ways to manage a remote worker?
Great question. And this is the one I was referring to earlier. My answer is it depends. And what I mean by that is taking into account sort of level in the organization. Is this person a manager? Is this person, a salaried individual contributor? Sort of level of responsibility, level of autonomy, in terms of how well they can sort of manage on their own, versus maybe an hourly employee that's used to being heavily supervised, that's doing sort of routine functions every day. And also too, how accustomed is the person to, to working remotely, because that can be such a brand new world for so many people, regardless of level. The thing that I've been really paying attention to, watching my husband who's working from home here with me, and my sons, and, different situations with employers too, is level of accountability, and being careful to balance accountability with connection. And one of the great things I just saw written about this is you probably don't babysit your employees when they're in the office. So there's probably really not a need to babysit them when they're working from home or micromanage them. Now, having said that, there are some great practices that I've seen out there. Some companies are having people, do a morning Zoom meeting with the team, and then an afternoon one, or maybe, just one a day, in addition to maybe one-on-one Zoom meetings. And the Zoom meetings are great because you actually get to see, all right, are you really where you say you are? Are you really working? And is, checking in on, on work situation, setups, all of that stuff. One of the things that I saw not too long ago, and I'm seeing it in my own house, is the tendency for many people to overwork rather than underwork. And so that can really be a challenge as well. You think, my husband and I were just talking about this last night. We don't have commute time. So I have a tendency, where I would leave my house at 7 a.m. to get to work. I'm now online at 7 a.m., and same thing at the end of the day, and making sure that people are staying really balanced with what they're doing. And then also, there will be the few that will try to, potentially gold brick the situation and watch Star Wars in the afternoon and game whatever you've got going on. If we use Skype for Business, and it sort of tracks, movement on the keyboard, that kind of thing. I think that using Skype for Business and using instant messengers is a great way to stay connected with people, and just setting the standard right up front this is what we're expecting. We don't expect you necessarily to respond immediately, because maybe the person is taking a break, or, getting a little stretch time, putting the dog out, whatever's happening, but to be able to really balance that. And again, my bias is always to kind of give people an A to start with, and then, you know, help them to maintain their A, not to, you know, not to assume that people are, you know, are taking advantage. I think the bigger piece of this too is to really manage overall productivity as opposed to moment by moment activity. And again, it depends so much on the role, the industry, the demands, the job, all of that. So, yeah.
Kind of back to your, I think maybe the first question about people working from home. You know, we have everyone working from home, very new for us, but we do have the monitoring system, and we noticed, you know, there were all of a sudden a drop in hours for a few people, and we had a dialogue with those individuals, and as it turns out, you know, they're now having to be a homeschool parent, you know,
Yes.
a home teacher. They're having to be, so correct me if I'm wrong, Nancy, but if you do have to reduce your hours, I think it's best to just talk to your employer, because you can make up that difference through unemployment, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, for hourly employees, that's definitely the case. Exempt employees are just expected to get the job done and not necessarily, you know, and they're not tracking hours as much as they are productivity and accomplishment, but definitely for hourly employees, that's key. And then, you know, to your point, Jennifer, just helping to be super understanding. You're absolutely right. There are so many parents that are dealing with this impossible situation. Christy and you and I were talking about this, you know, before the call started, and I'm so thankful that my kids are, you know, grown up now, that because it would be really, really challenging. But then, you know, just I think the thing that has stayed, I've seen work really effectively, is just staying super connected. Tim, you know, you have done with us a number of all team meetings where we're all up there on the screen, all, you know, 22 of us or whatever, and, you know, just doing a checking in to remember, hey, I'm part of a big team here. I'm not over here just, you know, swimming all by myself, and that can wear on, you know, mental and emotional health an awful lot too. The other piece too, Jennifer, when you were talking about noticing hours that maybe aren't, you know, or, you know, activity that's maybe not tracked. I know just while we've been sitting here, my phone has rung probably 6 times, and it's clients calling. And so often I'm away from my laptop and I'm on the phone. I may be walking outside so that I'm, you know, getting away from my husband's work conversations. And so again, I have a tendency to assume the best, and then, you know, until proven otherwise. Yeah.
So I'd add just a little bit to that real quick. As the owner, there's a lot of anxiety going on right now. Your tone as the owner establishes the level of anxiety in your company. And so when you start thinking through this, if you communicated one way before and you're communicating another way now, that can create another level of anxiety. So it's important to communicate, but it's important not to over communicate, because that just adds to the fear that already exists in your organization. It exists from the media, it exists from their neighbors, it exists from themselves. So as a leader, you don't want to add on to that fear. And by keeping a relatively level playing field with how you communicated before, you can keep your employees on a better plane, if you will, a flatter plane, as opposed to a up and a down plane, which is, oh, I'm getting ready for my call, I'm doing this. Everything changes in their day, and that just adds to their anxiety. The less you add to their anxiety, the more productive they're going to be. And it's interesting because for me, this isn't necessarily new. It's new. The reason why we're doing this is new, but I've been doing this for years. And that was always how we had to address it, was from the standpoint of, are we communicating with them in the office the way we would have that we're communicating with them now at home? And if we change that in there, it's a very human reaction to say, well, there's a reason they're changing it, what's going on? And that just adds to the anxiety level that these folks already have, and you already have it as well. So your tone, your approach, all of those things are going to have a direct relationship on how productive your employees are.
I love that you said that, Gary, and thank you, because that it triggers me to kind of add on just a little bit. There is so much fear, you know, and let's just call it what it is and name it and tame it. There's fear on so many levels, and there's so much sense that so many things in our lives are completely out of our control right now. So, Gary, that consistency of communication, I think, is everything, because, if you get, I know a lot of companies right now are, they're trying to step up productivity. They're trying to really prepare for, the reopening of our world and to try to make up the gap in revenue. And so there's there's sort of that added as well. One thing I would add to that I've really appreciated, from Tim and my direct supervisor at BBSI is really just starting our calls with just a check-in, to say, not just how are you, but how are you really, and kind of what's happening, what are you doing for self-care right now? The importance of being able to take 5 or 10 minutes and walk around the block and, get some fresh air, because this is stressful, and minimizing that stress, can, to Gary's point, that can add to, all of those other layers of uncertainty and fear. So, yeah.
On that note, some of the things that we've been doing in our office, we have about 40 employees, and each week we do a video and send it out to our employees or an email, and just kind of tell them where things are, appreciate everybody working so hard, and also not underestimating the reality of that we're in, because to some degree, I think Newsom's talking at noon today, are we opening up on May 3rd, or is it going to be extended to the end of May? That could mean changes for some employers. Those that maybe have been paying but have been sending people home, and they're not working, right? A lot of people in the construction industry, they were paying their salaries for the month, thinking that it's only until May 3rd, but if it extends beyond that, is that going to change? And just talking, realistically, but also being optimistic about it, because it will end at some point, but there might need to be changes in the meantime. And that's from the employer side. From the employee side, it was interesting. I got a call from one of my employees, and he called me and said, let's Skype, Jen. And I said, oh, I hate Skyping. I hate doing that. But we did it, and it was so wonderful. I got to see his kids. He showed me where he's set up, and he was so positive and thankful about being able to work and how lucky he felt despite everything that was going on. And I got to tell you, here I'm supposed to be uplifting them, and he uplifted me. So I think just having those one-on-one conversations with your team, if you're managing a group or managing a company, that just goes a long way, and it feeds both souls. So
I'm so happy you guys mentioned all of that, because it is so important just to check in with one another, take a deep breath. We're not, don't be so hard on ourselves, because this is something that's newer to most people, and it's important that we all give ourselves just a little break, because it's, especially as business owners as well, you're navigating so much more than what we're used to. But so thank you. Mental health is really important right now. Okay, this is actually something that I was really curious to hear the answer on. Question number 6 is, how do we comply with labor law poster requirements with respect to remote employees?
So this is, we've seen this addressed by a number of attorneys, and it sounds a little unrealistic, but the reality is, if you can mail them or email them to employees, in some cases you can do that. Ours are like the size of, my living room. They're huge, and there are 2 of them. There's a federal and a state. And so that's kind of unrealistic. You can pull all of the notices. The newer ones that are coming up, though, that are required for people to acknowledge and to have and to read and understand, certainly, however electronic, or even snail mail, but making sure that with the new ones, to make sure that you get some kind of a receipt or an acknowledgement. That's what we've seen so far. I love any other creative solutions, but that's so far what the attorneys are recommending.
Nancy, what new ones are you talking about, and how do people get those?
So the FFCRA, there is one that's required. I don't have it sitting in front of me at the moment. And we'll include those in the resource package that we'll send out. There's if essential businesses are working right now, there's a host of There's one that has to be posted by the door where any employees, vendors, or customers may enter. There's this long checklist that has to be completed and then posted as well. Those are Santa Clara County specific. And there are likely other ones out there, depending on the location. Those are the ones that I've been dealing with those so far.
Okay, thank you. Could we potentially post them on, let's say, since I work with Microsoft Teams, could we potentially post the posters on the general chat?
That's a great idea. That is a great idea. And then if it's the standard labor posters that people have, I mean, I'm gonna err on the super conservative side. Get people to acknowledge, even if it's just an email, that says, hey, I see that they're here. I have access to them. I know what my rights and my obligations are.
Okay, great. And then we have question number 7. I'm an owner of a small business, but having trouble navigating where to start with the CARES Act. Things seem to be changing daily. Can you point me in the right direction?
Go,
Take it away, Gary.
So this will take about 2 hours. I hope everyone blocked out time.
Get your coffee, and I speak a little slower than most people because I'm from Oklahoma. The SBA website is probably the best resource to get started with, in the sense that it's going to provide you the latest application, and it did change. It's going to provide you the latest interim ruling. And that did change, and it changed significantly, actually, in a number of ways. The thing to remember is every bank has a different standard for what they're going to want, and by the way the rule's written, they can ask you for whatever they want in that regard, and it can span anywhere from January 1st to March 31st, and it can be by employee. It can be by month. They can literally ask you for whatever standard they decide is their process. You're going to make a positive attestation to several items on your application. Those actually are going to tie you back to basically a promise that what you're telling them is accurate. So the best thing you can do is go to whoever runs your payroll. And I can give this information to Tim, and he can make it available. But there's basically a payroll register by month for 2019 all the way through March 31st of 2020. And then within that, totals by month, and then an employee register that says these are all the people that were paid the last day of December 2019. And these are all the people that I paid February 15th of 2020. Those are some changes that were made from the original application, but they're new now. The employee census on February 15th is really to establish that you were paying people on February 15th, because if you weren't, you're not eligible for the CARES Act. You have to now just take January and February of this year, not eligible. You have to take a different set of dates to establish your averages. And this gets really in depth, and Jennifer was right. I won't, but I could drone on about this for the next 2 hours. My recommendation is your bank should guide you. Your bank is going to be your best source once they start asking for information. In terms of the types of information they're going to require, I pretty much know all the banks at this point, and I'll get a set of information. There's 3 primary reports that if you have, you'll be able to fill out the spreadsheets that the banks are going to send you.
Yeah, and that's primarily related to the PPP program, the payroll protection program, and the loans that can be forgiven.
Right.
And so there's 3 main elements. That there's the PPP program, which is one of the best things for small businesses, and is something almost all of them should jump on. And again, work with their banks, as Gary mentioned, because not only get your loan, but a good portion or even all of the loan can be forgiven if you follow the rules right. And so the rules are not that onerous, but it's good to find somebody that knows them, because I used to be a CPA, and researching the IRS, you can go in a tunnel that never ends. And so similarly, you want somebody who already went through that tunnel and came back out and can tell you, here's the basic things you really need to know, and keep it pretty simple. But with the CARES Act and the PPP program, that's one of the best things to go after. There's also opportunity for tax credits and tax deferrals. But the loan program is by far the most generous for small businesses. Surprisingly enough, the initial law was really simple. And of course, then it got very complicated. But one of the things the government did is it made to where the owner does not have to have a personal guarantee, which is great. The risk is on the government. So your only risk as an owner primarily is if you're lying. So as long as you're telling the truth and with good faith and good effort, you're pretty well secure in that. And then as long as you follow the rules that they have, a good portion of your payroll, rent expense, or mortgages and utilities can be paid through that loan. And if it's tracked properly, it'll be forgiven, which is tremendous. And if it's not forgiven for the portion that's not, you'll have a 2-year loan for, I think it's 1% interest on that. So again, for one of the things I've found interesting with our consultants talking to business owners is some have an aversion to debt, which is good. Some have an aversion to the government. Some have an aversion to a lot of different things. And sometimes it's getting them to say, no, this is actually kind of like free money. If you follow the rules, this is really a good program. And then helping them to understand how to navigate which choice and how to get there. And then once you make that choice, then the fun begins that Gary talked about, where now you have to get your documentation and the banking and all that stuff. But for some people that had an aversion to the loan, once they really understood what it was, it is a tremendous help in these difficult times.
Yeah, there's one other piece on the, well, there's a lot of other pieces to the CARES Act, but one thing that I do think is important, and I don't mean to panic anyone, but it will run out of money. There are options if it runs out of money. There's an employee retention credit that you can get, a tax credit, and it's actually fairly sizable as well. It doesn't require the same level of application. It can be pretty favorable for some companies. If your gross receipts have been impacted by 50%, so forget payroll for a second. If your gross receipts have been impacted by 50% in the last quarter, and it's a quarter-over-quarter measure. So what's really important with this is that this can go on through the rest of the year. So if your gross receipts year over year are impacted by 50% or more, then you can apply for this Employee Retention Credit Act or credit, and it's up to $10,000. I'm not going to go through all the details, but I'll include some information that again Tim will make available to you. But in the event that the PPP runs out of money, number one, or number two, your payroll is running 70-80%, but your gross receipts have been impacted dramatically, then this may actually be a better answer for you. So there's different ways of looking at this. The PPP is probably the right answer for most companies, but it's not necessarily the right answer for every company. And you want to make sure, and especially if it does run out of money, you're still not out of luck. There is still this other piece of it is going to go, and it'll go through the end of the year, and it's based on quarter over quarter from the previous year and a drop in gross receipts of 50% or more, and it has nothing to do with payroll.
So is that enough information? there's a lot more available. But
Did they mute me?
No, you weren't muted.
They're all gone. No.
I think I muted myself because I was talking. I was just it's so much information. So it's just, thank you. Thank you for putting all that together.
And one thing, Christy, we'll make information available, but also if people have particular situations, we're willing to provide some information as well, one-on-one too. If they can just connect through you to us, we're glad to do that.
Thank you. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. This is so important for our members, because I know that if that can just eliminate some of their worry and stress for today, it's wonderful. Thank you. There is one last question before, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat. But this is the last question we received ahead of time. We are an essential business. Some of my employees are working, but I have an employee that says they don't feel safe due to COVID-19 to go to work. What do I do?
Oh, yes, this is a tough one. Certainly understandable. So many people are terrified of catching this virus, and, you know, and rightfully so. Common situation. Unfortunately, there isn't a wage replacement option for employees in this situation unless it falls under a very complicated OSHA sort of criteria situation. And I pulled the document. I'm not going to read it to you, but essentially there has to be an imminent threat that an employee sees and that is sort of, you know, provable, if you will. There aren't a lot of options in that regard. What the employer can certainly do, though, is make sure that you know, they're doing all of the social distancing. They're doing all, you know, now we're all wearing masks in public, taking all of the precautions, making sure that the workplace or wherever the job site, you know, is clean, and all of those, you know, the guidance from CDC and World Health Organization. But if the employee voluntarily decides, I am too afraid to come to work because of this, there aren't, you know, wage replacement options for them. At least not that I have come across at this point. Maybe something will change, you know. And I thought about, well, if you know, if the employee gets so afraid of that situation, you know, that becomes a mental health issue that's diagnosable, and then it goes down a very different, you know, a different path. But yeah, it's a tough one.
Nancy, what about the option of the employer then, if that's the case and they don't have another site for them to go to that's not around people, what about laying that individual off so they can then get unemployment?
Absolutely. That would be a great option. If that's, you know, if that's something that the employer can do, that's terrific. Because then at least there is unemployment that's available to them, for sure.
Right. So I'm gonna tie that back to the PPP, because it's really important here. The PPP is driven by full-time equivalents. So basically, how many hours did you work divided by 2,080 gives you an FTE. If you had 19 FTEs at the end of December of 2019, and now when you get your PPP loan, you're now going to be required for those 8 weeks to carry 19 full-time equivalents. So the people that aren't working, you're going to be expected to bring them back on payroll. What you can do is you can pay them 75% of their wages. And so there's strategies around the PPP is kind of what I'm getting at. So with that loan money, you can actually incentivize the people to come to work. So the people who come to work get 120, because regardless, you have to meet your payroll number on average, and you have to meet your FTE on average to gain forgiveness. If you don't do those two things, there starts to be that's an unforgiven element. The reason I picked the 25% is because if someone's making under $100,000 and you reduce their salary by more than 25%, then that's unforgiven. And it's not just the dollar for dollar after the 25%, it's the 25%. So you want to kind of establish a 24.9% guideline, if you will, or 24.95% guideline. But you can now use the strategy of, hey, if you come to work, I'll pay you 125%, because they're looking at payroll and full-time equivalents, not how many hours did John work. They don't really care how many hours John worked. They care that you kept the same 19 full-time equivalents and the same average monthly payroll of 70,000 or whatever it is. Those are the two things you have to make sure you keep in mind when you're going through the payroll protection program. You will have 10 days after funding to start bringing people back on board. And then by June 30th, let's assume that you had to slowly bring everybody back. Even if you don't establish that criteria immediately or on average, if you've brought everybody back on board that you had that was on your payroll as of February 15th, by June 30th, it's forgiven. So that's why I said there's a lot of layers to it, but there's strategies you can use with the payroll protection program. Remember what it's called. It's called the payroll protection program. They want people on payroll. That's the entire goal.
So that's in the event that you have employees, you don't necessarily have them working either, but you're continuing to pay them.
Right.
Okay.
You're going to need to, actually. You're going to have employees. You want forgiveness. You're going to have employees that are going to be at home. And your example, Nancy, is perfect. This person is too afraid to go to work. Okay. So that we can establish that we've met the guideline for full-time equivalent and we've met the guideline for payroll, I'm going to pay you 75.1% of your pay. But this person's actually showing up. I'm going to give them 124.9%. Now you've done everything you need to do to stay within the guidelines of the payroll protection program.
Yeah, and part of this is for the owners, another thing we've gone through. I love what Gary described there, because from a mindset, the money that comes through the payroll protection program, and to the extent it's going to be forgiven, it's a different kind of dollar than the typical dollar that a business owner deals with. So typically a business owner is saying, if I've got $1, I'm getting $1.20 worth out of this thing. And that's kind of a mindset. We're in a weird time. Here's some free money that you can use to keep payroll up. It may not be as efficient as you're normally used to, but it's a help for you as a business owner, and it's a help to the employees and the economy as a whole. So it's a little bit, it's from a standpoint of looking at things like, maybe I'm paying somebody 75% or 74% to stay home because they're afraid. Some business owners say, I just flat won't do that. Well, maybe you want to do it because it's not normal that you would do it. It's not forever. But in this particular time, the government's helping you with some finances to be able to do things like that you might not normally do as a business owner.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all. Those are the questions that we had come in beforehand. Do you have any other questions? We have about 5 minutes left. So does anyone have any questions that they want to ask everyone here? I know while we're waiting for those questions in the meantime too, I just want to say this. We're here to help. We're here if you need anything, kind of like what Nancy was saying before, not how are you, but really how are you? And I have my email, my cell phone, it's open for you to reach out. My friend is also, she's making these masks.
Oh.
And they're washable. And so, but she's doing this from the kindness of her heart. She's not charging anyone. If you need a mask, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to get one for you. And, even toilet paper, what do you need? we all have things that are going on. Even if you just want to talk, we can chat over coffee. We can, whatever you need, just please reach out. I've seen some amazing things happen with, our members, just reaching out. And, I had one friend, board member bring over fresh oranges. That it was just a little thing, but it meant so much. And it was something I could do with my daughter. We juiced them and we had the juice later. So it was fun. It's just something different, but please reach out. Let's say we have a question.
One thing I was going to throw out there as well, and Jennifer hit it a little bit and Nancy did as well, is it's really important individually and as companies to think about the other side of Corona. We are going to get out of this. And so as much as we need the kindness while we're in it and trying to navigate it while we're in it is really important, but it's also important mentally for everybody to think about, okay, what are we going to do on the other side of this? When this passes and everything else, because it will, are we going to be, taking some good habits forward? Are we doing some planning now that'll help our business launch or relaunch faster? Just really put some mental space to the other side of this whole equation.
Right, because it will get better. We will be really busy again very soon. I just know it.
Nathan had a really good question because a lot of our members are self-employed. They're independent contractors in the real estate industry. What sort of advice or financial resources are available for these individuals?
The payroll protection program is actually available to independent contractors, sole proprietors. It's available to any of those. You just have to be able to validate numbers. And if you can validate the numbers, then you're eligible just the same as a corporation, an LLC, any of those types of things. So again, the SBA site, just to kind of get a general guideline, is good. If they have specific questions, Tim will give you my email. I'm more than happy to try and answer any specific questions as it relates to independent contractors and the like.
That's great. Thank you. Let's see. Any other questions coming in? Great. Is there anything else you guys want to touch upon before we head out for the day?
Only that I'm just so gratified seeing so many business owners get creative with how they're managing through this, and really, we have one in particular that comes to mind, female-owned, San Jose-based company, and she has worked just tirelessly to do, cutting pay of her leadership team rather than laying them off, split shifts, reduced hours, but everybody is still employed. And she's applying for all of the the various loans, and looking toward hopefully a good future for everybody. So it's just been gratifying to see how creative people are being, to keep everything going, and with with the expertise of people like Gary and Tim in that regard, we'll come out on the other side of this.
Great. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us for our first coffee conversation. Hope you enjoyed your coffee, your chat. And thank you so much, Nancy, Tim, and Gary, and Jennifer. Thank you so much for bringing your insight, your knowledge, your expertise. This was really one of the best webinars I've been a part of, just with so much information, and really the information that we all needed. So thank you.
Right.
And join us next Tuesday.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a
Bye.
good rest of your week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.